Cool. Good. So before I really get talking here about Proust, I just want to say that a lot of people say they don't have time to read him. It just takes too long. I will say that there is a very good BBC radio program that's basically like a radio play version, dramatization of the whole thing. And I think it's they do an hour on each book, basically. So it's 7 hours, maybe a little bit longer. Might be more like 10 hours. But I will say that it's very good. You can look it up. Just look at BBC dramatization of In Search of Lost Time. It might be, or Remembrance of Things Past. I'm not quite sure which way they put it. But it's very good. It'll tell you everything you need to know. After that, you can just Google Marcel Proust quotes, and you've got it all. You don't necessarily need to read everything by him. You'll be okay. But I do think that he's worth looking at, and I do think that the more you understand Proust, the more you understand a lot of other writers who came after it. And now that I've got some people, I might as well just go right into it, which is the closer you get to understanding Proust, the more you'll really see his influences on people like Camus. Obviously, if you've read The Plague really works a lot out of Proust, in my opinion. I felt that he was very much a part of that, and Camus wrote a bunch of times in his diaries about Proust. He quoted him. Beckett wrote an amazing essay on Proust, and the more Proust you read, the more you'll understand Beckett. Jean Genet said that he loved Proust, and that specifically he liked the third book. So if you like Genet, you should really read the third book of Proust, and that would be Guermantes Way, or Guermantes Way. That one is his favorite. So if you like Genet, like I said, you should read that. If you like Virginia Woolf, who I think is absolutely very, very problematic, but she also said that she couldn't continue writing without having finished Proust, and we know Virginia Woolf was a big influence on Toni Morrison, so I feel like if you like Toni, you should probably actually read Proust also. I know a lot of people hate Jack Kerouac, but I really love Desolation Angels. I don't care. It's one of my favorite fucking books, and obviously I feel like that's when he got the most Proustian. I don't think On the Road or Subterraneans or any of that other shit is where he's at. But anyway, so that's my little thing about Proust being an influence on a bunch of other people. Now it's just getting to Proust himself. Okay, so first I'm gonna pour myself a little something to drink, and I only got a little something because I have things to do. But so there's a really famous story about how he met James Joyce, and they didn't really say anything, and the original story goes that neither one had read each other's work, and they didn't really have a conversation. There are other people who have said that they believe that Proust had read Joyce, was very aware of Joyce, liked Joyce, but that Joyce's eyesight was too bad to read Proust, so he didn't read Proust, but was also aware of Proust. And when it came down to the meeting at this party, Proust was just in he was either sick, because he was always sick, or in a mood and didn't want to talk to him, and that's why the whole thing became the exchange of just no, as it's often cited as being. I want to believe that Proust did, of course, know Joyce's work. It would seem kind of insane to think that he didn't know because he wanted to read everything that was possible, and it also makes sense that Joyce would know who he was, but that Joyce, obviously, his eyesight's so bad, and no one's going to sit there and read all the fucking In Search of Lost Time to him, or as much of it as was out to him. So that's my feeling on that, and I hold close that Proust did know him. And I say that knowing how much Proust read from around other people, and he does a very good job of discussing some of these people that he read. Like, if you look through his books, he has a big thing about, not big thing, he has a thing about how much he liked George Eliot and how that was very important. He talks about 1001 Arabian Nights, and how that was a big influence on the book. That's all. That's in The Captive. He talks about both of them, and that's really good. So, if you haven't read any Proust and you want to start reading Proust, what I will say is this: you have to find the volume that's going to work best for you. So, when we're dealing with Proust, we're dealing with a lot of different things. We have Proust the mystery writer, Proust the romance writer, Proust the tragedy writer, Proust the philosopher, Proust the psychologist, and Proust the historian, I guess. So you have to find which one works best for you. And one thing I like about Proust is that he also allows Marcel to go through an arc of going from kind of like, I don't necessarily want to say hero, but I guess he allows him to go from hero to villain. And that is, by the time we get to The Captive, we see that he's maybe not the nicest guy in the world. Actually, he's pretty fucking rotten, and then he's like sad for The Fugitive, and then Time Regained brings us back to the beginning. Because in many ways, this book does work like a circle. It works, it's aeological time, as I talked about before. It's very circular, because Time Regained was written at the same time as Swann's Way, and then he just decided that he would go back into Time Regained and add things and shift moods to deal with how he felt afterwards. And that's very important to how you read Time Regained. Claude Levi-Strauss does a very good job of discussing Time Regained. There's just so many books about him that if you don't read him, that's fine. You don't need to read him. But you should read about him because I feel like he had like a big influence on a lot of other people. But anyway, so here's how I would say to go about dealing with him if you want to start and you haven't started yet. So, if you like a romance story, like a coming-of-age kind of thing, then start with Swann's Way. Just start at the beginning. He tells you everything, like about his little kid. He eats the fucking cookie, the tea, all that shit. There you go, right? Now, if you want to deal with the L, the G, the B, the T, the Q of it all, that's Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah, he gets down to every aspect of queerness in that book. It's fucking amazing. Like, he really does. He definitely runs you through a lot of things, including like, not that we've used the term now, but the term then of cross-dressing. And he definitely talks about how people look kind of androgynous or look one way or another way. And like I said, those are pretty outdated terms now, but at the time, it was definitely him trying to go through the umbrella of that, or the spectrum of that, which could be queerness. So that's Sodom and Gomorrah. Like I said, The Captive is where he kind of turns villainous, and I think that's also where we gotta get into him as the mystery writer, where it's like who's cheating on who did what to whom. That's a really interesting one. I really like The Captive a lot. Fugitive is some sort of redemption, but not really for him, because he's never going to allow himself to get over his guilt that much. I mean, he says he does, but he doesn't. And I also say that The Fugitive is the one that I keep picking away. I left it there because I always wanted to have something to go to. And in place of reading The Fugitive, I've read his letters, and if you have time to read the letters are fucking amazing. His poetry, not so good. And I will get into his stories. That's why I'll end this, because his stories are very, very good. And it's like baby Proust, but it like leads into like, you could see how he's going to become this big thing at some point, because it has all of his earmarked kind of emotional like hang-ups in it, which is good. I mean, the name of the book is Pleasures and Regrets, so it's like, that's Proust in a nutshell. Yeah, so the other thing I want to discuss when it comes to Proust is that it's very difficult for me to deal with people kind of throwing him in with somebody like Joyce or Hemingway or Faulkner or I don't know, #DeadWhiteMen, because it's very important that he's queer. It's very important that he's Jewish. It's very important that he's chronically ill. All these things come through in his book that, well, I mean, Joyce also was obviously disabled. He definitely had eye problems, right? But otherwise, there's so many things that he has to go through to become who he is and write the way he does that a lot of these other people didn't do, and it feels unfair for people to just kind of write him off as dead white male. It's very silly to me. And so much of his work actually does work out of other Jewish thinking, specifically Henri Bergson. Henri Bergson had a big influence on him because Henri Bergson was one of the people who thought a lot about time, intuition, analysis, and duration, all of which are very important to Proust. In some ways, Proust does a really good job of adding a narrative element to a philosophical idea. It was like he really kind of worked out Bergson on the page, and, in my opinion, furthers a lot of the ideas of Émile Zola's like naturalism and experimental novel, but instead of making it happen over the course of lifetimes and over a family, as Émile Zola does, he allows it to happen over the course of a lifetime, and how each individual person can develop or doesn't develop. That's always my thing. That's what I like to get from Proust. Like, Proust will have us say, it's a different self all the time, and I like to kind of go the opposite, where it's that you're one self. You've kind of always been the same self, and that there are only very minor changes, and that those changes are actually just you exploring yourself and you just becoming a better version of that same thing. Like, you getting deeper into it. This is why I always say, like, if you like comic books, you should actually like Proust, because it's the same character in different situations, just like Batman's the same fucking person in different situations. And also, they take a long time to get through. So I do think that there's something to be said there. Okay. The other guy who I don't know why it's not written about a lot, the other big Jewish thinker that I believe that Proust comes out of, is Martin Buber. I feel like Marcel Proust, his whole thing is about relationships. Now, he doesn't necessarily do the God thing, and that's fine, but he does want some sort of sublime melancholy. He definitely wants some sense of something bigger. Maybe his God is happiness. Maybe his God is love. But I feel like he's definitely doing I, you, I, thou, I, it thing over and over and over again throughout the course of these volumes. And like I said, I don't understand why there's not more work done on that. But as I was just going over Buber the other day, I was like listening to it on audio. I had an awful version of it. I need to sit down and read it because it's really bad. But it just felt like I don't know that of another person as tapped into relationships as he is. If you do like one of those boards where you have like the lines going from one thing to another, like the police do, like the FBI, like, it's amazing all the stuff that Proust is going on with how one person's related to another person in terms of like relationships, and like working for another person and being friends with another person, and all that stuff again is, like I said, very Buberian, I guess, because it's like, how does one person treat another person over and over and over, and the way that Marcel relays a story too is always interesting to me. When he tells you, I saw this, as opposed to this person saw this and I'm relaying that to you, that's also very interesting, like how he has like second layer of like this relationship to that relationship. Like in other words, I think the most interesting thing is if somebody is gossiping in this book. That's the most interesting aspect for me. And I don't want to take anything away from other writers who are doing their own thing, but I don't feel like I get a lot of these same things from a lot of other writers. There was a point, it seemed for me, where people decided they wanted to get rid of big emotions, because people were getting away from the Gothic, and I look at Proust as maybe being like the tail end of it in some ways. And there's something I like about the Gothic. Like, there's something I like about Wuthering Heights, it's just big emotions. There's something I like about Mill on the Floss, more so the Middlemarch, which isn't necessarily Gothic, but same era, and that's big emotions, and people have been tampering down their emotions over the years, and I don't like it. I want there to be like that that aspect, and that's what makes Proust also, like I said, the psychologist, I think, more so than a philosopher at times, that he wants to dig into these emotions and how these emotions are working and why these emotions are working. And you get that the most in the captive again, and the fugitive. But the captive, really, I think he really decides to deal with, like, why is he reacting in ways that he's reacting, and that's not necessarily philosophy. That's more psychology. I think in the beginning he wanted to be more philosophical, ends up being more psychological, and then by Time Regained, which is really, really good. And if there's a book that you want to reread and pick away at, it's Time Regained, because it's got all the best parts of Swan's Way and all these really important things about what occurred during the war, or was going to occur during the war, and it's also him being very petty. He remembers in that one, he talks about, like, kind of remembering all the people who were anti-Dreyfusards, and he talks about, like, basically, like, all the anti-Semites in that. He's just kind of like, I will not forget this. I remember this stuff, and it's really, really important to me that he allows himself to have that moment before this book closes out, to be like, these are the people I spent time with. These are the fucking friends I had, kind of shit. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow myself to just kind of flip open a book about Proust and see where I land, and try to read from that and see how that works, because I think that you can do with Proust what I'm going to do with this, which I feel like if you haven't read Proust, you can flip to any page and just start reading, and you will find something to think about, something that's enjoyable. Marshall McLuhan did this with Finnegan's Wake. I think you can do it with Proust also. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first grab Time and Sense by Julia Kristeva. I like it. I do have some bookmarks in there, but I'm going to try not to go right to a bookmark, and let's see where I come out. Well, I'm not going to read that because it's a diagramming of the Proustian sentence, which you maybe can't read, but it's fucking awesome. But here we go. I'll start here. This reduction of Proustian memory is certainly not non-numerical in the Bergsonian sense. While it participates in the numerical nature of the verbal expression, the image and the narration, it situates spatial fragmentation within an elastic, polymorphous duration. Discrete multiplicities are the essential components of memory, which is good because that's kind of my big thing about it, how he's always working with memory and remembering. And this is why Time Regained, I say, is the one to read, because he kind of goes back through his memories and goes, maybe I got that wrong, or maybe I didn't apply the right mood to the memory. So he's working out of sentiment and sensation, as I like to talk about, which also I feel like Pessoa doesn't talk about Proust, but I'm like, Pessoa read Proust, there's no way in hell he didn't. But anyway, does this mean, or parallel thinking, but does this mean that Proustian time is absolutely subjective? While Bergson, though familiar with the psychological studies of his time, stresses on ontological duration. An hour is not merely an hour. It is a vase full of scents and sounds and projects and climates. The simplest act or gesture remains immured as within 1,000 sealed, each of them filled with things of color, scent, a temperature that are absolutely different from one another. Still, the partitioning that characterizes Proustian time takes into account the telescoping movement between past and present that opens onto the extemporality so dear to Bergson. The other life, the life in which he sleeps, is not included in the category of time. To enjoy the essence of things, that is to say, to live outside of time. Pure time, however, is contingent once again on numerical and linear time. Proustian plurality exteriorizes common time. Several planes at once, puppets which exteriorized time. The plurality does not evade common time, but proclaims that time is universal. I was not situated somewhere outside time, but was subject to its laws. This ambiguity is essential to literature, where the imaginary or the phenomenal translate the symbolic or the ontological. Still, Proust's version of pure time, which captures the past and the present through a metaphorical coincidence, seems to be in accordance with Bergson's notion that the past coexists with the present. For Bergson, a past is always already a past as well as present. Similarly, every present both refers to itself and to a past. Furthermore, the metaphorical loop of Proustian time, as I said, the circular, a loop consisting of sensations that are imminent to the telescoping movement between past and present, recalls Bergson's belief that the memory of something occurs at the same time as its perception. We believe that memory is never formed after the perception. The memory is contemporaneous with the perception, which also would bring us forward into Jung, which is why I say that Proust is very psychological. Jung would also have us like moving away from any kind of causals and have us dealing instead with co-occurrences, and that would be the memory is contemporaneous with the perception. You know, I always say there's no causal, but they're the affected. Everything is affected, nothing is caused. They just co-occur. So, one might compare the temporal coincidence that characterizes Bergsonian duration with the analogy and the metaphor of Proustian time. In their own way, are analogy and metaphor not a present contracted with the past, or a present that is only attained when it joins with the most contracted level of the past? It is on this point, however, that there is an undeniable difference between involuntary memory and pure duration. When Proust's notion of involuntary memory is in a discursive mode and attempts to capture the spatial arrangement of the characters, it is an intense contraction and an ontological deduction. In Proust, there is no subjective transitivity in which a given reminiscence drawn out through an image linked to another would be different from ontological contraction. Similar to Schopenhauer's will to be, the Proustian temporal dynamic is that of being itself, operating through the same sensorial and linguistic movement that makes it into the narrator's involuntary memory. And I won't go on about involuntary memory, but this is one of those things that's really important to Proust, and it's one of those things I always tell people when they're dealing with writing diary, which is to just allow and to let things out. It's also something that myself and Isabel and Jack and I talked about at the Lambda Festival when we did Writing to Yourself about intuitive writing. So now I'm going to give you a little bit of what Deleuze has to say. Again, I'm going to flip through here, and then I'm going to end with just a quick bit from Pleasures and Regrets. So let's see what Deleuze has to say. Again, bookmarked it up because Deleuze is also kind of my homeboy, even though I probably shouldn't like him. So, I kind of like this. So this is the beginning of the chapter of pluralism in the system of signs, and I'm going to go right to 2. The way in which something is emitted and apprehended as a sign, but also the consequent dangers of an interpretation that may be objectivist or subjectivist. Each type of sign refers us to the object that emits it, and also to the subject who apprehends and interprets it. We believe at first that we must see and hear, or else in love, that we must avow our love, pay homage to the object, or else that we must observe and describe the sensuous phenomenon that we must work, must think in order to grasp significations and objective values. Also, I like this because it's also Deleuze doing his best to kind of write a Proustian sentence. Disappointed, we fall back into the play of subjective associations, but for each kind of sign, these 2 moments of the apprenticeship have a rhythm and specific relations. And in this, because he's doing signs and talking about relations, he would have done much better, in my opinion, if he had really pointed to how each person is kind of a sign also for Proust. But he doesn't necessarily do that. He deals with other things in this book, but he kind of misses some of like the Buber stuff. And I don't understand why nobody fucking put Proust and Buber in the same sentence as much as I have. It doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, 3. The effect of the sign upon us, the kind of emotion it produces. Nervous exaltation is produced by the worldly signs. Suffering and anguish by the signs of love. Extraordinary joy by the sensuous signs, but in which anguish still appears as the subsisting contradiction of being and nothingness. Pure joy by the signs of art. 4. the nature of meaning and the sign's relation to its meaning. Now I'm going to move ahead in here and come up with something else. And this time we'll go to something that I did mark because I did like it at the time, and I'm not quite sure what it's going to say, but we'll see what I liked. And that is, we have seen how Proust revived the Platonic equivalents of creating and remembering. But this is because memory and creation are no more than two aspects of the same production: interpreting, deciphering, and translating. And he writes them as interpreting, deciphering, translating. This is intuitive analysis also for Bergson. Being here the process of production itself. It is because the work of art is a form of production that it does not raise a special problem of meaning, but rather of use. Even the activity of thinking must be produced within thought. All production starts from the impression, because only the impression unites itself, the accident of the encounter, and the necessity of the effect, a violence that obliges us to undergo. Thus, all production starts from a sign and supposes the depth and darkness of the involuntary. Imagination and thought can be splendid machines in themselves, but they can be inert. It is suffering that sets them in motion. And if you remember what I posted earlier, Proust has a whole thing about grief bringing out the most in the mind. So there's your suffering. And now I'm going to end with this bit from Pleasures and Regrets. It's his stories. I think if you read the stories, you've got plenty of Proust to go with. And then, like I said, flip through some stuff about him. Have fun with him. He's enjoyable. Or maybe he's not enjoyable. Maybe he's really fucking dry. I don't know. But so I'm going to read this bit. It's almost at the end of the first story, Death of the Balusaire Savant. All the emotions, the fatigues Balusaire had suffered during his sister-in-law's illness had accelerated the course of his own. Again, this is relationships, right? Like he's dealing with how one person affected him in a certain way. He had just been told of his confessor that he had only a month more to live. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. It was raining in torrents. A carriage stopped in front of the chateau. It was the Duché Olivian. Once he had thought to embellish harmoniously his deathbed scenes. It will be some limpid evening. The sun will have set, and the sea, visible through the apple boughs, will be mauve. Light as light faded garlands and persistent as regrets. Little pink and blue clouds will float on the horizon. It was 10 o'clock in the morning under a low, murky sky in a pelting rain that the Duchess arrived. Worn out by his illness, completely absorbed by more exalted thoughts, and no more touched by the charm of things which formerly seemed to him to embody the value and the grace and all the delicate glory of life, he had to tell them that the Duchess was still now too weak to be seen. And although she insisted, making them inquire again, he still refused. It was not even from a sense of duty. She simply meant nothing to him any longer. Which, again, that's why I say if you read this, you've read a lot of it, because this same thing fucking happens with Albertine. Death had been quick to break the bonds of an enslavement that during the last few weeks he had dreaded. Now, as he tried to recall her to mind, nothing appeared to the eyes of his spirit, and those of his imagination and his vanity were closed. This is The Fugitive right here. This sentence is like The Fugitive in like a couple of lines about like, I'm trying to remember this person, I can't really. Yet, about a week before his death, the announcement of a ball to be given by the Duchess of Bohemia, where Pia was to lead the cotillion of Crestuccio, that's probably really mispronounced, who was leaving the following day for Denmark, furiously revived by his jealousy. He asked to have Pia sent for. His sister-in-law hesitated. He thought they wanted to prevent his seeing her, were willfully tormenting him, and he became angry. Not to vex him, they sent for her at once. And again, before I get out of here, big emotions. They were willfully tormenting him. He became angry. Not to vex him, they sent for her at once. This is all Proust over and over again. Every emotion gets to be really big, way too much. Somebody's trying... Proust is basically everybody's trying to fuck me in some way or another. That's it. If you want to know Proust in a nutshell, somebody's trying to fuck somebody over, and they're mad, and they're going to get down to it. And this is why better writers than me, better thinkers than me, have discussed it as a mystery, and then also in some senses I guess a revenge story. You know, And I love that idea about thinking about it, and I feel like also that's probably the Hugo and him coming out. But so I'm going to let you go with that. And wait a second, hold on a second. I'm not going to let you go with that. I'm going to let you go with the very first sentence of, well, not the very first sentence, the very first paragraph here of A Young Girl's Confession. It's the second story. And that is, "At last, deliverance is almost here. Of course I was clumsy. I didn't know how to shoot. I almost missed myself. Of course it would have been better to have died at once, but after all, they were not able to extract the bullet, and then heart complications set in." And I love this story, and I think you should read A Young Girl's Confession if you read nothing else in this fucking book. And give them a shot if you haven't already. I hope you enjoyed that. It wasn't my best work, but have a good night. Thanks for showing up.